Welcome. That's what I'm talking about. That's a bit of an oration there. Okay, so I asked Brian how he would like to be introduced, and he said, "Well, just tell them that I'm from LA and that we met online." So, so I guess that's the introduction then. But I'll say that we know each other through Smidle course that I run, and Smidle has been also in Brian's life since he's been a student for us for a year now and just completed the course, and it's been this tremendous pleasure to know him through this entire year online. And then yesterday we met for the first time in person, and it was kind of like, oh my god, this is incredible. And it's just so serendipitously happened that Brian is on holiday here with his wife, who is over there. Hi, Brenda. And he was willing to step in as a speaker, cancelled. And why I'm extremely excited about today's topic is because it's a little bit sort of less academic-y than we've got a newsfeed, and hopefully slightly more sort of invigorating and exciting, and hopefully we'll be doing a little bit of some moving around at the end of this, and just sort of having a bit more of an embodied experience than we typically do. I mean, that doesn't say that there is not going to be an awesome amount of all sorts of wonderful intellectual insights coming from this presentation. So, Brian, I know I haven't said almost anything about what it is that you do, besides that you work in theater and that you've got a great experience of doing that for a number of years. But I assume all of you have read the bio, and then I trust that you will tell
what personal stuff in there.
What you see to be relevant. But I just wanted to say that it is such a treat to have you here, and I'm just so excited to see what you've prepared for us. And I'm just stoked that you're here.
Yay, me too. Thank you.
Okay, so that's that then. Bye, everyone.
Thank you so much. Thanks, Johanna. Thank you guys I know I'm stepping into probably some pretty big shoes here. So I appreciate your open hearts and open minds while I talk about two of my greatest passions. First, theater that I've had for my whole life, and now my newly found passion with psychedelics. Let me get some business out of the way here first. I have a couple disclaimers. First of all, I'm just speaking from my life experience. I am not a certified therapist, but I have played one on TV, so I think that gives me some kind of credentials here. Secondly, I'm in no way condoning or encouraging any illegal activity or the use of illicit substances unless I'm invited. So we can issue information later. And also, finally, everything comes in threes, right? So I got to have a third one here. I'm not condoning getting on the stage under the influence of any of these substances. Titus Andronicus on LSD could be a quite frightening experience, right? So, although magic mushrooms with Midsummer Night's Dream could be pretty magical, I think. So first of all, I'm going to go ahead and start with, not yet, it's cool. I'm just going to start with a quick little story. I wrote my own play, a solo play back in 2010, which premiered in Hollywood. It's titled Blank. It tells a story about my experience being adopted. I was adopted, and the title Blank literally refers to the namespace on my original birth certificate. And the play is about me trying to fill in that blank of who I am, right? So I was fortunate enough to perform it all over North America for about a decade. And I went to my hometown in Kansas City to perform it. And we were in this very intimate theater. About 50 people sit there comfortably. And am I in the picture? Am I good? 50 people sit there comfortably. And fortunately, I always had about 75, 85 on the book. So I'm like, let's fit as many people as possible. The stage was the ground, and then the audience raked up. And we just added more and more people onto the stage, onto the performing area. I put people along the wall here, other people along the wall here. So my performance space just got smaller and smaller. And it was literally, we were all one together as this action is happening. And I'm nearing the climax of the play. And I'm in a very vulnerable position. I'm almost naked. I'm down to my skivvies. Don't worry, I'm not going to recreate that right now. And I hear this sniffling. And that happens, right? That's why we do the theater. It's for that immediate reaction, the communal experience, right? And the sniffling slowly turns to whimpering, a little louder, and then just this audible, uncontrollable sobbing. And like I said, we're all on top of each other, so everybody hears it. And the poor person was trying to hold back, but she just could not help herself. And I'm nearing the climax of the play, and I'm going through it, and inside my heart is breaking for this woman because she's having like this major altered transformative experience over here. But from that moment, the play completely took on a life of its own. It just became this whole new thing. Everything I said, how I moved, was influenced by this woman's journey. The audience suddenly saw what I was doing through her eyes. They were going through her experience watching. And the whole space became this medicine capsule. It was a beautiful psychedelic experience. And that's why I'm here today. That's why I do what I do. And come on in, is that someone in the waiting room? And that's why I'm here talking to you guys, and that's why I'm endeavoring on this new path called Psychetheatrics, where I want to create a space for just anyone to have an experience like that using theatrical techniques and tools. Go ahead and flip it to the next slide, please. And yes, theater is indeed psychedelic, man. This is gonna be my cheat sheet, y'all. So it is obviously mind and soul manifesting. Theater explores, it questions, it challenges, it laughs at, it scorns, it embraces our very existence. It holds us toward the mirror up to nature, right? As Hamlet says. And it also encourages a reaction, an action, an expression, a release, a transformation, an integration into everyday life, right? It also involves the mind, body, and spirit. When we express on stage, the actor expresses using the whole tool, right? The mind, the body, the voice, the spirit, the heart. He opens his or herself up and just experiences through the character, embodies the character. And the audience, in turn, as well, opens their heart, mind, and body to receive the experience, allowing for an expression, allowing for that to happen. Whether it's an emotional release, a physical release, it could be anything. It's ceremonial and ritualistic. And we're going to get into this big time because all of theater really comes from this ritualistic perspective. But it goes beyond just mere storytelling, right? Everyone really embodies the story, embodies the character. And there's intention involved, right? There's a set and setting. Literally, there's a set, right? There's a setting, there's a stage, there's a performance space. But there's an intentional mindset with the telling of the story as well as the receiving of the story. And ceremonially, there's masks, there's costumes, there can be music, there can be dance. Really, it's a celebration of life, right? And medicine work, like if you think about psychedelic therapy, that goes beyond just talk therapy, right? I mean, we're sometimes and I'm not ripping talk therapy at all, you guys. It's very important to vocalize your stuff, but sometimes we can just get stuck in the same story of our trauma and just, it's this cycle of just retelling our story, but we never ultimately release. And psychedelic therapy, I find, helps us embody our story a little more and releasing that. IFS also goes beyond, just talk therapy, where you can actively, presently have a conversation with your different parts. The altered state, ecstatic. Clearly, this woman, when I was performing, had that experience in the theater. But there's a catharsis, right? There's a purging of emotions. Something else takes over. You get in the flow. I've experienced this as an actor. Just some nights you just get in the flow and everything just comes out so naturally. It doesn't always happen, man. Sometimes you're just working so hard. And when you're in the medicine, you're like, dude, the medicine's not doing anything. Work, come on, get in there. What is that image? And you feel like you're working so hard, and the same thing can happen in theater. The audience just isn't with you. and you feel disconnected, but other times you just surrender to the present moment and everything just unfolds naturally, creating this altered state. There's a story real quick. Sir Laurence Olivier, we're in England, so I imagine I can tell a story about him. Known as one of the greatest actors of all time. He was performing Hamlet, and he was absolutely brilliant. And as soon as the lights went out, the audience erupted, just applause. They immediately stood on their feet. They were going nuts for this guy. They all take their bow, and even the other actors on stage acknowledged his brilliance. And afterwards, Sir Laurence Olivier, he went down to his dressing room and just started throwing shit. He was so pissed off. He was just angry and throwing and yelling. And a few actors came in and said, whoa, you were absolutely brilliant tonight. And he said, I know. And I go, well, what's wrong with you? I have no idea what I did. And that's the thing. He just released into this altered state. He surrendered, and it just took over him. And when this happens, it can be very therapeutic, right? A deeper relationship and connection to the self happens. Something bubbles up from the unconscious, and an ecstatic release and transformation can occur. And this could be therapeutic for the individual or the community as a whole. There could be a message for all of society. And finally, it's communal, like what we're having right here, right? We're in person together, actually. We're having an experience. I feel your energy. Hopefully you feel mine. But it's a communal experience. There's a relationship between the performer and the spectators, between the shaman and the journeyers, right? It's a unique communal experience every time, too. Every performance is different when it's live, when it's in person, because whoever you're performing in front of is giving a different energy. Y'all are a different character, If we did this tomorrow, different group of people, different experience. And that's the beauty of the communal connection. And that's what theater brings. So we need that today, y'all. Oh my gosh, we need connection. We have this, in my abstract, I talked about the fourth wall, right? And we're always behind, there's always literally this screen that we're all behind. So it's so good to be with all of you in person. Let me just say that right now. But that's why theater needs to happen. So I hope I've convinced you all that theater is psychedelic. If you like, we can go to the pub now. No way, man. Freaking made all these slides. You're going to see them all. So I'm going to get into some examples of this from my personal life, my personal experience, then dive into a little bit of the origins of theater and ritual theater, and then kind of what's being done today therapeutically for theater, like stuff that you were talking about, drama therapy and stuff. So that's so cool. So, all right, go ahead. You can go to the next one. So we're all psychonauts here, right? We like to explore the mind and the soul. I'm a theatronaut. I have no idea if that's a real word, but we're going to roll with that. I've been exploring theater my whole life. Acting came very naturally to me. I was adopted, and there are issues of abandonment and rejection that come with that. And so in order to avoid all that, I put on a lot of masks to avoid rejection, right? And I was very much the pleasing adoptee, the adaptee. Some of us call it the chameleon. I could go into a room, size it up, and say, okay, this is who I need to be right now to make sure I fit in, And we all do that in some way, right? It's a social strategy. But theater, it was my safe space. It was my safe space to explore my voice, to explore my physicality, to explore my expression, to explore myself and who I was. And there's a bit of an irony in that, right? I feel safe exploring my own emotions, but while wearing a mask and a costume, through another character, right? And also theater, any type of performance, you're putting yourself up for rejection, right? So it's like I'm reenacting my own myth of rejection and acceptance, right? But it really became my therapy. And I remember I was performing The Grapes of Wrath in high school, and this is when acting became very serious. I'm going to be a very serious actor right now. And I read The Grapes of Wrath. My God, it was like that big. And And Tom Joad, I played Tom Joad, and my literature teacher pulled me aside after he saw it. And he's like, Brian, that was actually a very mature performance, and I noticed you had this pent up anger inside that you gave to Tom, and Henry Fonda didn't do that in the movie. I just wonder if you'd like to talk to me about your choices here. You know, I give him a very heady answer. Well, he was wrongfully imprisoned, and he just had to, you know, and then they're gone. Anyway, but now looking back, I was exploring my anger that I had for my mother for surrendering, for not holding me, for letting me go. And so it just became this playground of me exploring my own emotions. I would play Tom completely differently today, and that's the whole point of it. Right? Go ahead and go to the next slide. Thank you so much for doing that. Oh my gosh. You're the best. Let's give him a hand, everybody. Brilliant. So my story, I got most joy and most out of it by creating my own work. I ran a theater company. Come on in. Someone's trying to come in right there. Oh, no, she's gone.
Hello. Run away.
Hi, welcome. Here, let me start over for you. No, it's fine. It's fine. Everybody introduce themselves and said a little poem. It's your turn.
Thanks, Sanji.
Gosh, poor woman, I'm putting her on the spot. I ran a theater company for 12 years, and I just enjoyed choosing what I like, what I think is important coming from me to the public. And I wrote 2 plays. I told you about Blank. And I wrote a follow-up play called At Ghost Kingdom, which takes a magnifying glass to the search for biological relatives. And the Ghost Kingdom is a psychological term coined by Dr. Betty Jean Lifton. It's a spectral place, the Ghost Kingdom in our heads, where all of our fantasies of who we would have been if our biological relatives kept us. So the ghosts of our mothers, ghosts of our fathers, the ghosts of all the what ifs, my baby, the ghost of my baby. And of course, for the parents, the ghosts of all the babies. When I performed this for the general public, as well as the foster adoption community, I'd always receive testimonials. People would come up, and I had this woman said, Brian, I haven't told this to anybody, but I surrendered my son to adoption. And this was the beginning of a transformation for her. She's been holding on to this her whole life. And it happened countless times. Other people, even who weren't connected to adoption, would say, Brian, I totally relate to this. My father walked out on me when I was 3 years old. It just brings something out of people when you share your personal story, your personal myth. You never know what's going to happen. At Ghost Kingdom, I had an off-Broadway premiere slated for October of 2020, and all the theaters closed. So my wife and I actually filmed it in our apartment during COVID, and that's what it became. So it's not a play, it's actually a little film. And I sent it out to some people who helped out, and a good friend of mine called me the very next day. Talk about synchronicity, Johanna. Called me the very next day and said, Brian, I just watched your film about, finding biological relatives, and you wouldn't believe it. But today, I watched it last night. Today, I received an email, and in the email said, hi, you don't know me, but I think we may be related somehow. I was adopted, and I think you're related to the man who could be my father somehow. And that's exactly what the movie was about. And he said, because thanks to your play, I saw that email from a whole new light, and I responded. He said, I don't know if I would have responded before. So there's this transformation that can happen. And not only for the audience, but also for the artist. I wrote Blank, and I performed it probably 35 times before I actually started figuring out what it meant. So a lot of it came from my unconscious. And when I started performing in front of foster adoption support organizations, not organizations that sell babies, but organizations that spread awareness and education. And I started hearing back from the other adoptees. I just was having revelations like, oh, that's why I wrote that line. Oh, that's what that line really means. Even something that I wrote, I didn't fully grasp until like 35, 40 shows in, and it changed after that, because then I start really understanding what came from inside me. So theater and creativity and art can come from a place, and you express it, and it can be healing and transformative to the audience, to the spectators, to the viewers, but also revelatory for the actual creator too. And that's the magic of this. So yeah, reenacting your own myth. Now that's where the origins of theater are. Go ahead and go to the next slide. It's all about reenacting the myth. And a lot of scholars believe that theater, as we know it today, came out of the cult of Dionysus in ancient Greece. I'm going to read this to you. This is beautiful. In the deep, dark forest and in the lush green valleys, worshippers of Dionysus celebrated the eternal cycles of death and rebirth, symbolized in the sacred mask of the wild god. Drunk and intoxicated, wearing the mask of Dionysus, the actor is at once the shaman and the priest. Channeling the presence of the fearsome divinity, he drinks the sacred wine and eats the raw flesh of his prey. In this eternal moment, he becomes one with the god and the beast residing inside of him. Within ancient Greek culture, the sacred rites of Dionysus have been appropriated and transformed to theater performances. The shaman became the actor, the participants became the audience, the sacred altar became the stage. From myth as a ritual performance emerged the theater of tragedy, in which the undying spirit of Dionysus, majestic and terrifying, speaks to us even today. I think that's beautiful. But they're saying this is probably the original, this is where theater sprung out of, particularly the tragedy. And they'd hold these festivals of reenacting the myth of Dionysus. You know, his limbs were torn apart, right? And then he becomes whole again. In medicine journeys, how many of us have felt annihilated in it? And then when you come out of it as integration, you try to find a more whole self. And that's what that's what the ancient Greeks did. Also at the same time, if you guys remember the Eleusinian mysteries, they'd reenact the myth of Persephone, right? And that's also a death rebirth. And I will draw notice to the wine, drinking the wine, and of course, the Eleusinian mysteries. If you guys have read Road to Eleusis or The Immortality Key by Brian Murarescu, said that the wine is a lot stronger than what it is today, and that it most likely had some kind of psychoactive substance in it. So there could have been some kind of influence from medicine in this as well. It's a great book if you haven't read Immortality Key. It's quite interesting. But tragedy was born out of festivals like these, and then the comedy arose, and you have tragedy and comedy. The masks of tragedy and comedy probably come to mind right there. Also the Dithram, which was a choral hymn for in honor of Dionysus. They say that was the beginning of Western drama as we know it today. But yeah, this reenactment of myth, these themes of, you know, suffering and then triumph, and this connection between the mortals and the immortals, right? Was highly theatrical, and masks were involved, costumes were involved, singing was involved. There's this connective feeling to the numinosity. Go ahead and go to the next slide, please. Thank you. And it's this ritual theater that's just been around. And Claire Schrader in her anthology here says it's as ancient as mankind itself. Since the earliest times, there has been an urge to reflect the numinousness of the universe through some kind of enacted structure, through ceremony, and at times through story. Myths emerged in order to explain the incomprehensible aspects of the universe. Such were the beginnings of ritual theater. It uses the form of a story, usually a myth, for healing and transformational purpose. It's an experience of unity through time that connects us with the ancients. Gary Raucher here has a couple definitions of ritual. Deliberately structured action linked to intention and performed to help realize intention. Sounds like a medicine ceremony as well, right? The set and setting, the intention, going in with it for a certain reason. Then that he evolved that definition into an action deliberately performed, sometimes with repetition, to invoke or evoke a response from a deep and customarily difficult to reach psychospiritual resource, and to precipitate that response into a perceivable change in awareness, behavior, or circumstance. So yeah, it's all connected to myth. Eliade talks about kind of the timelessness and boundlessness of it, right? Detaching yourself from profane time and magically re-entering great time and sacred time. But ritual, it involves portrayal and performance, a performance space. And it includes the use of masks and makeup, costumes, music. But most importantly here, it often involves the audience. It doesn't only entertain the audience, it involves the audience. The audience is included. The Greeks went to the theater together as a community to experience something, to experience a catharsis together. Go to the next slide, please. And that is ecstasy. Woo, woo. The Dionysian rites participants would reach an altered state known as ecstasis, enabling a release of powerful emotions through wild ecstatic expression. And then, of course, Aristotle's theory of catharsis, where the dramatic action of the play's events climaxes into a release of emotion, having a purging effect, bringing about transformation. As a community, right? They did this as a community, and when we participate in a ritual theater event, Claire Schrader says, we know that we are experiencing a unique entity, that it is both theatrical and also draws us to contemplate our deeper nature, feeling that something profound in us has shifted. Emotions have flowed. We feel elated, inspired, and invigorated, as if we have entered in a new state of being. We have, in fact, entered into what Sue Jennings describes as an altered state of consciousness, similar to the states that shamans induce in their powerful healing ceremonies. If I believe if we did this as a community today, our emotions can be expressed and dealt with and accepted and celebrated, before they become issues, before we suppress, before it turns into anxiety or depression, right? And I think we'd have a much healthier society if we had that. So let's keep it going. But speaking of the shamans, let's go to some stuff that probably happened even before the ancient Greeks. The indigenous cultures also were steeped in myth and ritual, telling stories theatrically, telling stories of their ancients. They had mainly three types of theater: ceremonial, to commemorate important events, teach moral lessons; ritual theater, to enact religious ceremonies; and performative theater, to entertain and tell stories. Go to the next slide. I
You
won't.
might be able to
Can I do?
do it.
Is it going? No, it's not. It's not connected.
Okay.
Yeah, I know, that would have been amazing. For instance, in the Dagara tribe, I apologize if I didn't get the pronunciation completely right, but they have rituals for everything. For transitions, all the stepping stones of life. Even when there's like a disagreement with a neighbor, no matter how big or small, they dealt with it together in a theatrical, ritual way. It's natural to them as breathing, this sense of theatrical ritual activity, so that they can all move forward together as a community. We're going to go ahead and go forward because I think we're probably on time. The Bwiti tribe, this is what I thought of right away. Obviously, and this is the combination with medicine, actually, when they work with ibogaine for sacred rites of passage, right? And they'll even separate the genders, and when they have these rites of passage, they work with the medicine when the girl becomes a woman and the boy becomes a man. But it's all part of their culture, of their experience. This process is revered as a tool for healing, self-discovery, and connecting with the spiritual realm, deeply ingrained in the Bwiti cultural identity and spiritual practice. So I'm going to get into a little bit more of possibly mixing a little bit of medicine with some of this work. But here is the prime example of when medicine is worked with ritual and also in a theatrical way, because there's definitely cost faces and mask and dance and music. Go to the next slide. For a tribal society, ritual theater in some form or other is core to the life of the tribe. It is an expression of a way of life, reflecting the cycles of nature and the milestones of human experience, and an event that the whole community would automatically participate in, just like the Greeks, right? Primitive peoples evolved rituals to express the fundamentals of human life, following the cycles that are intrinsic within life forms in order to bring about resolution and thus healing. And this may be the healing of a tribe, healing of a family, healing of a disease, or resolving of threats to the tribe's survival. So it was just steeped in their culture. Go to the next slide, please. In tribal society, there's no distinction, right? There's no distinction between physical healing, medicine, science medicine, and spiritual healing. It's the exact same things. When you heal the thing, when you heal the spirit, you heal the body. And Dr. Joe Teffer talks about this in his book, Fellowship of the River. He's really working hard with the Western medicine world, and by combining it with the ancestral wisdom, with the indigenous wisdom, to work on this very concept. And he's trying to do this through epigenetics, but when you heal the spirit, you heal your body follows. And that's exactly what this is. Now, you don't need to be a religious or, oh, thank you. I was cheating ahead. What's next? You don't really need to be a deeply religious person or spiritual person to have this experience at all. And I turn to the best right here, right? Joseph Campbell. He says a ritual is the enactment of a myth. And by participating in the ritual, you are participating in the myth. And since myth is a projection of the depth wisdom of the psyche, by participating in a ritual, participating in the myth, you are being, as it were, put in accord with that wisdom, which is the wisdom that is inherent within you anyhow. Your consciousness is being reminded of the wisdom of your own life. So even if you're not a big religious person, you can have a ritualistic, theatrical experience just by touching this inner wisdom that's inside of all of us, of each of us, right? All right, let's stick with this. So that's really kind of the origins of theater. Go to the next. It's all based in a reenactment of myths. It springs out of that and the mystery within all of us. So there's a lot of stuff happening currently, and that's what I'm looking for, to work with some of this with Psychetheatrics and kind of mold it into my own thing. But there's this guy named Paul Rebillet, who in the late 70s and 80s worked at Esalen, and he had a workshop called The Hero's Journey. And he would literally take his participants on every stage of the journey of Joseph Campbell's hero's journey. So people would come in with like a, maybe there's a big transition in their life or with their own intention, and they would heed the call, answer the call, and then go on that journey. And he would use ritual and movement and drama to explore these transitions, right? And these stages, and use archetypes as reflections as our own inner conflicts and growth. And he says a hero's journey is a chance to play out a story of transformation within the framework of ritual, where eternity and chronological time interpenetrate. When we take an archetypal structure and act it out in the here and now, our daily life is illuminated by the eternal. I love this idea of working with myth and archetype. I think it's brilliant, and it just touches something inside of you, that inner wisdom, right? Go to the next slide, please. There's also psychodrama. So along with mythodrama, you can have psychodrama. Are you guys familiar with psychodrama that's going on today a little bit? Yeah, founded by Jacob Moreno. So like if I'd never been hugged by my father, right? I would say, okay, sir, can you play my father right here? Play my father, Stanton? Not right now, but and I want you to hug me, hold me tight for 1 minute. And then can you play my mother? Just stand 5 feet in front of me and look at me and smile with a warm face in acceptance. And then can you play my 10-year-old inner child that was never hugged and put your 2 hands on my back, and sometime during the hug, I'll let you decide, just slowly release, and you create this scene for healing, for closure, for a transformation to deal with something. And this guy, Scott Giacomucci, says through psychodrama, participants can renegotiate physiological, emotional, cognitive, social, and existential impacts of trauma. We can enact scenes needed for closure, for healing, and for growth. Though they are not real experiences, it appears that the body and mind are able to integrate the experience like any other real experience. And there's more and more research now coming out about this. And people are taking a little further. Dr. Bessel van der Kolk and Dr. Gita Vaid, he talks about psychodrama in his book, Body Keeps Score. But they held a workshop in 2022 where they gave low-dose ketamine to participants. And then they held psychodrama sessions. And they said it was incredible, the results that came in. And it was so strong and touching. And I think this is a great avenue to explore what this does. It's a very low dose. They would say 5 milligrams to 20 milligrams, just enough to drop the defenses, maybe access your emotions a little easier. And then you create this scene and dialogue. You can even do this. You can cast an IFS session, right? You can cast different parts of yourself and have conversations with them. But this idea of working with low dose medicine in this kind of theatrical and physical environment, I think it could yield just great results. But of course, you got to be careful. This isn't something to just fuck around with, right? Harm reduction, and make sure the set and setting is correct, and you have therapists on site and all that. But I think it's great. I also think low 5-MeO DMT would be great for it too. But lots to explore in this area, and I think this really excites me. Go to the next one. The next two are kind of fun. Psychomagic, Jodorowsky. Did anybody see this at all? Anybody? Yeah, it's crazy, huh? Yeah, so he uses like this performative art therapy mixed with world religions and philosophy and indigenous ritualism, and he'd work with people. So like this guy, he had to be born again. I can't remember the details. Correct me if I'm wrong. But he went through a whole birthing process, and he was completely naked with a mother and father, and they created like a birth canal for him, and he crawled through and then like laid on his mother's lap. So it was pretty intense. It's pretty crazy and intense. One guy he actually buried in dirt because he was going through this transition in life, and he buried in dirt and then dug him back up, and he a total rebirth. But there are these very artsy, theatrical, performative art things that have been very theatrical healing. Thanks, brother. And then, of course, theater of the oppressed. This one is more like for social justice. It empowers marginalized communities. They go out in public and create statues, and just stay in public like, this is the Statue of Freedom, and what does freedom look like? What does inequality look like? But the big thing was the communal aspect of this, right? When theater and communal, that's one of the big things, right? They'd stage a scenario of oppression, and then they'd ask the audience for suggestions on how to break through this oppression. Like, what should we do socially as a community? And so they would improvise audience suggestions, and the audience would take part. Right? That's like including the audience with their active participants. And he actually changed it. He, instead of spectators, he called them spectators. So the audience would literally take part in this dramatic theatrical presentation. So this is, I'm exploring all these things with Psychetheatrics, where I want to empower individuals to unlock their full potential through innovative, holistic acting workshops that blend theatrical techniques with personal development. And I could do this as a workshop. I could do it as retreats. I could do this as a like a 7 week, drawn out over 7 weeks. But I'd love to work and collaborate with all. Go ahead and go to the next one. I'm looking to collaborate with people in the wellness industry, in the psychedelic medicine industry, because we can combine a lot of these modalities with theatrical technique. So like if I bring in a sound healer, right? Instead of laying on the ground for an hour, moving the sound through you, you do it for 10, 15 minutes. And then maybe you really focus on where the sound is in your body. And then how is that encouraging you to move? How is that influencing you to move? And then people start moving with the sound and moving it up and down their body. And then the different sounds where they live in your body, and you create this movement with it, right? And then you can evolve that with the sound of words, the sound of vowels, like pull it from text. If you have a poem or a play, like the word lonely, like, oh, lo, where does O live in you? Oh, where does that live? Where does that live inside of you? What does that feel like? And then you put it with the word lonely. And it's just about having a deeper connection with the sounds that are coming out through words. So there's a lot of things that we can do with all these different healing modalities in this world, mixed with theatrical technique. These are under construction, but they'll be updated soon, I hope. Okay, go to the next one. So, and a lot of, and I'd love to talk with you about drama therapy, Neely. But a lot of, in the United States, what's happening is the theatrical, the therapeutic theatrical stuff is really only happening for like troubled teens, people in prison. But I want to make it available to anybody who wants to work on themselves, who has a desire for personal development. And so just for instance, I'm like creating different tracks for people. So like psychonauts, looking to integrate sacred medicinal experiences in creative ways, translating their profound psychedelic experiences into tangible personal growth, bridging insight to daily life. Just a little example of all these. And of course, here's this community that I've gotten involved in, looking to heal through creative expression by exploring identity, building connections, rising above abandonment issues, and addressing core emotional needs in a safe container. I think we can create a lot with this type of therapeutic healing work. And I'll just end this part with a quote from Olivier again. He said, "I don't know what is better than the work given to the actor, to teach the human heart the knowledge of itself." But I just disagree with one thing. I think it's all of our work. I don't think it's just the actor. I think it's all of us have the ability to dive deep inside, to touch that inner wisdom and teach the heart the knowledge of itself. And that's what I aim to do with Psychetheatrics, where the art of theater meets the heart of existence.